Hi everybody, today's lesson's on seedless vascular plants, or ferns. The main characteristics that these plants have in common is that they have vascular tissue. If we recall, last week we talked about moss, which are non-vascular plants because they don't have vascular tissue, and that means moss always has to stay very, very small, only a few centimeters high as far as they can grow. But ferns can grow much taller. And that's because they have vascular tissue, which means xylem and phloem that transport water and nutrients upwards against the force of gravity. Also, for the first time in the ferns, we see true root stems and leaves. The leaves of the ferns do have this waxy cuticle to prevent water loss. And just like any other plant, except mosses, water has to be absorbed through the roots, transported upwards through the stem, and then exit out through the leaves of the plant. So, let's talk a little bit about the reproduction of the ferns. In moss, the gametophyte stage was the dominant stage, right? So most of the moss plant was tissue used to make sperm cell and egg cell, but that's not the case in sperm. The gametophyte, the stage that produces sperm and egg, is very, very small, and it's this heart-shaped structure that we see down here. Usually, the sperm-producing organs are found near the outside of this structure, and the egg cells are found towards the center, right? Just as always, the sperm cell needs water so it can swim over to the egg cell, which is why ferns, even though they have vascular tissue and have cuticles to prevent water loss, still need water around for reproduction so that sperm cell can swim over to the egg cell. Once that sperm cell fertilizes the egg cell, we can then begin the next stage in the life cycle, which is the sporophyte stage that we see beginning right here. The sporophyte stage is the dominant stage, so when you look at a fern, you're mostly looking at that sporophyte tissue, that tissue that's designed to reproduce using spores. Now, the most obvious feature of the sporophyte stage are these long, complex leaves that are called fronds. On the back side of the fronds, we see these little dots here. And these little dots, when you zoom in on them, are nothing more than clusters of spores. So that's where the spores are contained and eventually released when it comes time for this generation of the Ferns Lifecycle to reproduce. Each spore would then eventually grow into a new gametophyte stage and begin the entire life cycle. So if we take a quick look at the Fern Lifecycle, it looks like this. If we start off with spores here, they are dispersed. They're spread around with water and wind. They'll eventually grow into that new heart-shaped gametophyte that we see right here. So this is a young gametophyte. This is a more mature gametophyte that produces both sperm cells and egg cells. The sperm will eventually need water around so it can swim to the egg cell. Fertilization occurs, and once that happens, the egg cell grows into the sporophyte, which is dominated by these large fronds or compound leaves here. This is a young leaf. It's called a fiddlehead. It's actually the only edible part of a fern, but you have to boil it twice because it has like this toxic ooze that comes out of it. So you cook it once to remove that, and then you have to cook it again to make it edible. Alright guys, that's it for today's lesson on seedless vascular plants.